This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, welcome to Best of Today. I'm Nick Robinson. Crisis? Which crisis? Boris Johnson has been Prime Minister for just over 2 years. His premiership has been dominated by the COVID crisis. And just as we were beginning to dare to hope that that might be coming to an end, along come signs of another crisis with empty pumps and empty shelves and warnings of the return of a wage and prices spiral leading to 1970s inflation. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, joined me in our Conservative Party conference studio in Manchester, the first time he'd agreed to talk to us in 2 years.
It's really been 2 years. The time has flown, but it's great to see you again.
Do you believe that this is a crisis?
No, I think that on the contrary, what you're seeing with the UK economy and indeed the global economy is very largely in the supply chains, the stresses and strains that you'd expect from a giant waking up. And that's what's happening. And you see, we're sucking in huge amounts of energy from the world's sucking in huge amounts of energy of gas in particular. It's pushed up the gas prices. There's the global shortage of lorry drivers. There's a shortage of lorry drivers even in China. Now,
understood the point that you're saying. Those are some of the issues that we're going to fix. But I think don't be in any doubt that this country has formidably good logistics and supply chains people. I mean, they are absolutely brilliant. Our supermarkets are, we are world leading in logistics. So it's not a crisis.
They will start to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that there won't be stresses and strains. There are clearly stresses and strains.
Let me tell you what the stresses and strains might be. Lord Wolfson,
go on.
Just have to pause a second and then I can get a question to you. So Lord Wolfson, who's the chief executive of Next, one of the country's leading Brexit-supporting businessmen, says it is possible that if the country gets this wrong, there could be a shortage of goods, there could be a lack of carers, there could be, in his words, a 70s-style inflationary crisis, an inflationary spiral. That is reason for government, for a Prime Minister to worry, to take it seriously, not to dismiss it.
Of course.
Have you a plan to deal with those worries?
Of course. And I've read what Lord Wolfson has said, and I think that it's an extremely interesting moment because. The issue that is often raised is immigration and how do you deal with the shortages of labour. And it's primarily a shortage of labour, which is after all a sign of economic robustness, that the market is demanding labour in the way that it is. How do you deal with that, and what steps should you take? Well, Nick, you and I have, although maybe a long time since I've been on your show, you and I have talked often about immigration. I've always been in favour of people who have talent and industry coming to this country. I want to see that.
So should we listen to business leaders, let me just make a point,
go on.
who say, let us decide what we need. Now, Lord Wolfson says, I know, he says, who I need. I don't need some Whitehall bureaucrat, to use my phrase, not his, some Soviet-style central planning under Boris Johnson that says you can have 172 visas for this occupation or not. Let business decide.
Yes. Well, let me say why I think that approach has extreme limitations, to put it mildly. And what you saw in the last 20 years or more, almost 25 years, has been an approach whereby business of many kinds was able to mainline low-wage, low-cost immigration for a very long time. And in some ways, of course, that worked well. And the people who came were fantastic, hard-working people, did a wonderful job. But what that resulted in was the suppression not just of pay, but also of conditions. So to take the road home.
You made that point. You made it at length in a series of interviews in the run-up to this conference.
Hang on, I haven't had a chance to make this point on your show for 2 years. It's by your own account.
That was your choice, not ours. Now, you want British workers, that's clear. What I'm asking you is, do you have a plan to deal with the consequences of your decision not to have that sort of immigration? Lord Wolfson says there could be a shortage of goods, there could be a lack of carers, there could be 70s-style inflationary spiral.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by stresses and strains?
No.
Have you got a plan to deal with it?
I don't think that the problem will present itself in that way, and I think actually that this country's natural ability to sort out its logistics and supply chains is very strong. But what we can't do, and of course, I want to stress.
What do you mean by stresses and strains?
Well, the shortages of low wage labour that Lord Wolfson and others are talking about.
Shortages on the shelves.
But what we won't do is pull the lever, which I think is what you're talking about, marked uncontrolled immigration.
No, nobody suggested that. Brian.
Yes, they are.
What you're doing is arguing against something nobody wants.
No, that's what they are. No, hang on, sorry,
wants to have
exactly
visas.
So what Lord Wolfson is saying is he doesn't want any kind of control or restraint on the number of people that he can access or from abroad to run his business. And
he says anything in the sort.
I understand. Well, I think that's what you just said. Yeah. And I think that, and I think the problem. I think that's exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
So I think the problem.
Well, you're telling me what someone else thinks, and I want to know what you think. No, promise.
And I don't think that is the way forward. I seriously don't. This country's at a turning point, Nick, and we can't go on. If you look at the productivity of the UK, we have undershot all our major competitors for 2 decades or more, and that is because we have a low wage, low cost approach where business does not invest in skills, does not invest in capital or facilities. Look at the road haulage industry that we're talking about. The fact is that they haven't been putting money into truck stops, into conditions, into pay. So there's no supply of young people in this country who, frankly, at the moment are thinking of becoming truck drivers.
You have made that point very clearly, and I'm going to make a new one.
That is going to change.
Prime Minister,
that is going to change, and it's going to be a good thing.
Stop talking. We are going to have questions and answers, not where you merely talk, if you wouldn't mind. Now, the question I now want to ask you is about the cost of living, if you would. Do you accept that is a crisis? Who will pay, for example, for the biggest hike in business taxation that we've seen in years? £12 billion, the highest corporate tax levels seen since 1989 under a Conservative government.
If you're talking about the corporation tax increases, they've been delayed.
I'm asking you who pays it.
And obviously corporations will eventually pay it. But what we have in the meantime, to get back to the point I was trying to make before you asked me to stop talking, which you see, an injunction you seem to have revoked, what we are doing in the meantime is giving businesses a super deduction to enable them to invest in capital and equipment.
My question to you is who pays it? Isn't it the consumer that always pays corporate taxes? It will add, in other words, the cost of living crisis.
No, it's business that pays it. And I think that if you look at the potential of business to make investments in capital, in equipment, if you look at their balance sheets, they have the ability to do this, and there are huge sums that business could invest in making their business more efficient, and that is why
taxes are paid for by consumers. I want to ask you about the cost of living in general, if I can. This week you've said that it's right to go ahead with cuts to universal credit of £20 a week, that they were temporary and they were required by the pandemic. Isn't it tough for Conservatives at this conference who are spending £20 on a steak for a main course in a restaurant round here for one meal to say to people who are struggling to feed their families, we can't afford to give you £20 a week?
I know it's tough for people, and I understand that people on low incomes are working very, very hard at present to make ends meet. And we want to do everything that we can to help them. And that's why we've done what we have with the increases in benefits that we've put through the local housing allowance that I did almost immediately on becoming Prime Minister, the increases in the living wage, in childcare and so on. We've also increased, we've also made sure that we have a situation in which people's wages are now going up. But what I think is wrong is to take more money in taxation and use it to subsidise low pay. We have a new fund, a £500 million fund to help people through the winter. But you say. We give the money. It's not we who would give. It's not the government. This is money that will be raised in taxation to support low pay. What I think should happen is that organically, business and industry should be paying people a little bit more in order to help them, and that is actually what is happening. And I think most people would rather see that. And we've got the fastest economic growth now in the G7.
Understood.
As we come out of this.
A lot of why you say this is because the big message at this conference, isn't it, is to get on with the job and is levelling up. And I know your argument essentially is if you get wages up, that helps levelling up. But I want to ask you, as I have in all the areas of this interview, whether you really have a plan for levelling up. Let's take schools, for example. You sacked your education secretary. The man you hired to be your catch-up czar quit in protest of what he said was your half-hearted ambition. We had a Tory MP on this programme yesterday saying that young people in the north will leave school with one GCSE grade lower in English and maths than in London and the South East. What is your plan to level up in schools?
What we're doing is making sure that we've got a £3 billion catch-up plan already to help kids catch up from the lost hours during the pandemic. But we're also doing more to support teachers in less advantaged areas, in disadvantaged areas, who can turn schools round.
Will you get a new catch-up czar? Because you hired one, he gave you a plan, you turned it down?
I think Nadeem Zahawi is an excellent Secretary of State for Education, and our plan is to invest in schools, and what you've seen, if you talk about catch up and levelling up in schools, look at what we've done with tutoring and that's exactly what I mean by levelling up. At the moment, you've got a kind of arms race in education whereby some hardworking families decide to get tutors for their kids. Many middle class families do the same, but not everybody does. Not everybody can afford it. And let me complete this point. If I'm allowed to continue talking, let me complete this point. And what we're able to do is offer families up and down the land tuition that they would not otherwise get. And that's what I mean by levelling up. So there are 6 million courses in tuition that we're now offering. We're putting tutors out across the country, and I think that is a fantastic thing.
Forgive me.
And there will be many other things to do besides.
Some other subjects that I know that you care passionately about. Of course, we want to hear you talk. We want to hear you talk on a range of subjects, not just one. Let's turn to a subject that was dominating the thinking of the country in the lead up to this conference, and you have talked about now. It is the issue of crime against women and young girls. You've talked of your passion about this, your anger about this. Do you have a plan to make women and young girls safer, though?
Yes, and there are several parts to it. You've got to make the streets safer. We're putting more police out on the streets, and we've recruited about 10,000 of the 20,000 that I promised at the election. We're putting more CCTV, better street lighting. But what you've got to do is address the underlying frustration of millions of women and millions of people across the country at the slowness of the criminal justice system and the inadequacy of the criminal justice system in dealing with crimes of rape and domestic violence and sexual violence and all that.
Prime Minister, because the Tories have been in power for 11 years and cut the budgets of the courts, and so we've now got 500 violent crime or sexual abuse victims have been waiting 2 or more years before their case get to court. You've got a new Justice Secretary. You've got a new sense of urgency about this issue. Is it time to put some money in justice?
We're putting money into every part of the UK public services.
Well, the budget's been cut by a quarter over a decade.
The problem is not just a question of money, but we're putting money in. And we've hired many more prosecutors. But the problem is not just to do with money; it's to do with the way we handle the evidence. And as you know, the difficulties that are presented by mobile phones, in particular, when the defence is able to seize upon this or that piece of data and use it in court, and that's very complex. But it is no excuse for the delays and the frustration that women are experiencing, and we need to fix it. And I think that the police need to frankly, I think that the inability of the system to deliver swifter justice has led to a certain frustration in the police and perhaps a failure to take these complaints and these reports seriously enough. But they need to fix it, and it's not good enough. Now, what we've also done is strengthen the sentences for serious sexual and violent offences, and that's the right thing.
You have a woman's minister.
But
she is also the
needs to be
foreign secretary
accelerated
at the moment. If you really want to take this seriously, if you want to be seen to take this seriously, isn't it time to create that as a proper job, not a tack on to someone who's incredibly busy?
I think Liz Truss does an outstanding job, and
that's not the point I was making, was it? I was asking whether it's time to make that a proper job.
I think she does an outstanding job.
Okay, now let's move on to the thing that has really dominated your life for so long since you've become Prime Minister, which is of course COVID.
Yes.
What we've seen here at this conference was unimaginable a few weeks ago. People mixing late at night in bars, no social distancing, not many masks, no vaccine passports. Is that how you hope, you think, life can now be, at least for those who've had their jabs? Are we now looking at a future in which we've not put it behind us, but we have finally learned to live with it?
I think you have to remain cautious, Nick. You have to be humble in the face of nature and the potential of the disease and the risk of new variants. But there's nothing I can see in the data. There's nothing I can see in the rates of infection at the moment that makes me think we need to drop Plan A. Plan A is the right one, and we're going to stick with it. And I think it justifies the decision we took in July the 19th to open up, and a decision I would just remind you was opposed by the Labour Party at the time. So if Captain Hindsight had been in charge, we'd still be in lockdown.
That's it from this edition of Best of Today. Thanks very much indeed for listening. And remember, there are many more editions of the best of the programme that you can find on BBC Sounds.
The one constant in the world is change. To succeed in business and life, you need to progress with it. Constantly question, adapt to new information, and rethink. Cass Business School has done just that. Changed. Introducing Bayes Business School. For those with the vision and courage to do things differently, the future is yours. Bayes Business School. Always learning.